a lot of times the worst thing for someone who isn't ready for scale or isn't healthy for growth is to grow. That's one of the most dangerous things. And for me, my drive and ambition years later, after a lot of pain, realizing that all of it was just an attempt to be significant.
What if going harder and faster isn't the answer to success, but the very thing holding you back? Adam Cruz knows that tension firsthand. As a high performing design leader and church planner, he helped generate over 115 million in revenue for companies like Intuit and ZME, while also building thriving ministries. But beneath the hustle was burnout, brokenness, and a silent collapse. Now, through the Healed Hustle, Adam helps mission-driven leaders build ventures that flourish without sacrificing what matters most. In this conversation, we explore the hidden cost of unregulated ambition and the power of healing-driven leadership. Adam, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Hey, glad to be here, Tim. Thanks for inviting me.
Good to talk to you again. We chit-chatted a while back. We're introduced by our good buddy, Mike, and been doing well?
Yeah, doing really well. I'm always on the journey trying to figure out what's next and how to survive. So I've got all these rascals running around going back to school. And so I like the fall and I hate the fall kind of at the same time.
Fall
We're
is
in it.
fall is our best time of the year. Gloria and I have our anniversary. Probably by the time this airs, we would have already
Oh,
had
yeah.
it. And both our kids were born in the month of October. And, we spent most of our years in the South, which I'm actually in Atlanta right now, and it's starting to cool off a little bit. So anyway, I like that. How many kids you have?
We have 3 kids. Yeah. High school now,
Oh
new
man.
era.
Is there a lot of hustle that's going on with that?
No, they're very calm, very, just honoring to themselves and to you.
No
Yeah.
activities,
No
activities.
activities, no demands, just real light touch.
I watch what's going on with our granddaughters and
Mm.
they're young and I watch what's going on with people with kids and I'm just like going, that might even be related to our topic a little bit about just that the stress, the
Yeah.
activities and all that's going on with just raising kids
Yeah.
it's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I find that I just translate all of my hustle dysfunction into them. And so then I start to see it in them and I go, "Hey, don't do that." It's an interesting reflection.
Yeah. Well, let me kind of ask something. I usually ask this early on, but I'm going to ask it of you because I'm curious what the answer is going to be, truthfully. I'm going to give you a choice to answer one of two questions, and I'm going to let you just pick it and answer it. And the question is, what do you do?
Mm.
Or who are you? Which would you prefer to answer? Pick it and go.
The easiest one to answer is, "What do you do?" The hardest one, that's probably the more meaningful one, is, "Who are you?" But I go, "Oh gosh, how do I what lens do I answer that
So
through?"
I'm curious, do you feel any pressure because, like we're people of faith and all that, that you've got to answer, who are you? Because I've almost always had people answer that one. I've always wished someone would say, you know what, here's what I do. I'm a business guy. Yeah, whatever, whatever, whatever. And I'm like going, I appreciate that authenticity. So do you feel some pressure at all?
My immediate reaction was like, I should answer the "Who are you?" one, but I want to answer the "What do you do?" because that's the one I can pick up and go, but the "Who are you?" is like, well, who was I 10 years ago versus who am I today versus who am I tomorrow? It's like versus my broken identity and addiction with ambition versus my identity as a dad. My brain kinda did all that in about 90 milliseconds.
So what do you do? Tell me what you do.
I mean, at the core essence, I enjoy starting things. I love to make ideas real. That's honestly what I love to do more than anything is to do that myself and to help others make ideas real.
So what's the good thing about that? And what is the challenge with the starting and the energy of the beginning that you have.
I mean, well, I don't know, maybe the hard side of it is all of us have something inside of us that we want to put out there. A lot of people who've got ideas, they've maybe already had put an idea out there and it worked and they're trying to do another thing, or they've just been sitting on something inside of them for a while, want to try it. It's hard. It's hard to actually get traction and make it work, and actually be something that will be around in a few years. I'll keep doing. And so the hard side of it is figuring out how to create focus and clarity. And then I guess the good side is like once you have focus and clarity, it's exciting to watch the fuel kind of get turned on and the impact to be made and the alignment within teams. And so, yeah, all of that.
So the reason that I bring it up is I have at times in moments of self-awareness wondered if I had a challenge with sticking to something
Yeah.
because of exactly what you're saying. And then some other things, I wondered if I was addicted to like adrenaline
Mm,
or when things got hard. Like I mentioned, the company that we're in right now, we are building some big things that are pretty hard that
mm.
aren't necessary. Well, we're starting things too, but trying to think of another thing I could throw in the mix and let you respond to it. If I got bored too easily, I mean, I always wondered, man, did I just get bored and just want to kind of move on? I mean, does any of that resonate or hit you at all?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, that I love the 0 to sort of 1 space, and I think by the time something gets to 1, then I start to get maybe a little bit bored, and there's people who love the details of now going in and scaling that thing to 10, and, I just recognize that for me, it's like, that journey, it can take a long time. It can take several years to even get to 1. I think a lot of people forget that as they're going in, that it can take a while to get to 1, and so you got to hang on and find some motivations and some conviction somewhere. And I think for me, I can hang on, my boredom, curiosity sort of drives me for a while. And you know, then we got to move on to the next challenge.
Yeah, this is where it came up for me recently. I've been writing a lot more and I do a lot of my ideation or my ideas with some AI tools. And I realized there were all these book ideas that I had. I was on Chat GPT and I said, hey, listen, I'm thinking about what I should do with some of these book ideas. And literally, AI told me that I started a bunch of stuff, but never finished anything.
Unprompted.
Sort of unprompted. I mean, like literally,
Wow.
it almost like,
Are you
ow.
going to really ask me one more idea?
It's like, can we just finish one of these?
That's hilarious.
And I actually kind of went, and I went back and looked at all my project list and all my ideas and some notes that I've got in journals. And I'm going, I do have just a boatload of things that I have come up with ideas, thought about, and I never even got them to one. It sounds like you at least move them to one, or do you have a lot of ideas strewn along the roadside on the journey of life you've been on?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've often thought of myself as I don't know if in leadership development they would call it like a number 2 or how they would like the phrasing of all that. Because like ones can be the idea list is long, and then twos will move an idea forward, maybe secondary leadership type stuff. Because I've often thought of myself as, to use a biblical reference, as an Aaron to a Moses. I enjoy the journey of coming alongside ideas and helping make them real. So what's interesting is I myself don't necessarily have the list of ideas, although my wife might differ, but I don't necessarily have like a list of ideas. I enjoy the process and journey of helping make ideas real in some form of partnership. So for me, a lot of times that's shown up in partnership.
Hmm. And I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's good. So you could kind of come together with people. That's kind of unique in the role I'm at. I used to be the lead. And then as I moved into a coach role, I recognized it just sort of allowed me to support a lot more.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of got me in this place where I really, as part of my journey, I really don't have to, I was going to say, have to be in front of things as I'm talking on a microphone on a podcast. I have to
On
be in
camera.
charge.
At least the podcast isn't called Tim Stevens, you
It's,
know, it's at
yeah, or
least
it's
got
like
a name,
the Tim
or Tim.
Show. One of the words that you use is strategist. Tell me more about strategist and what that
Mm.
is.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the core, it's like so much of the journey I've been on is when you're in early stage of an idea, it is very hard to get clarity because there's a million directions you can go. And as you get some kind of traction, that just scales unless you have clarity on what we're actually trying to accomplish or trying to measurably get done. And so I think for me, it's like all of the execution is on the backbone of strategy. But a lot of times we all spin our wheels. I need a website now. I need XYZ now, as opposed to like why. Why do you need any of that? What are we trying to achieve? Helping people spend time in understanding where we're going and why we're going there helps us know when we're not on track or if we are on track. So I enjoy the strategic development process of ideas and people.
Is that something you've always had in your 40 something years, or is that something you developed over time?
Oh, I mean, yeah, when you're 20, I don't know what I'm doing. You're just winging it, you know? When you're 30, you're probably winging it even more, but now you've got some, arrogance probably fueling the tank because you've done some things, and then, I don't know, I'm sure it changes as you get even past where I'm at, but at 40, I finally start to go like, "I don't know, we've done some things and learned some things, so there's some best practices here." So I don't know that it's always been there, but I've always been intrigued by process and frameworks and like I always used to obsess over like how did somebody figure that out? Not the fact that they did figure it out. I wanted to reverse engineer it. Like what were the building blocks? What did you do that got you there? Or if somebody like failed or had a falling out, I wanted to understand like well, what were the inputs and the building blocks that caused that. So I've always been kind of fascinated by the process.
Yeah. So let's back up. Let's talk about Adam, the early years. It seems like you were, I'm always fascinated with people that have gone through the ministry route and then they've moved over into a business setting. That's fascinating. The reason that's interesting, the audience, if they've been listening in, they know this about me. I actually was saved in a business setting and I have never considered going a ministry route. I've always been fascinated by it. And I must admit, I have never really liked the structure
Hmm.
of
Of
ministry.
church.
A lot of things like that.
Hmm.
Tell me a little bit about Adam as he's the ages of your kids and you're moving along and you decide this is what I want to do. And sounds like early on that was ministry stuff, or was it something else before that?
Yeah, I mean, I when I was a teen, I was a musician, so I've always written songs and been in music and bands, and because you're in bands, you bootleg Adobe Photoshop and you learn how to create album covers and, you know, make posters and promote your band, and so I was kinda always in that realm, and for me, my parents were always involved in ministry, so I kind of grew up in not like a ministry family, they were not vocational pastors, but they were always just very, very, very involved. So leaders would require me to be there all the time. So I kind of grew up in that world. I saw a lot of the behind the scenes before understanding what the behind the scenes was. When I graduated college, I wanted to be in ministry in some realm. That started as a youth pastor, building a youth ministry at my home church that didn't exist and kind of grew it up and then evolved into planting a church as the creative arts pastor. Jeff, our senior pastor, and myself and two other families went down to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and planted a church in the capital and did that for another 7, 8 years. So, yeah, kind of a decade of building ministries and planting churches and things. So,
Were you from Wyoming, that area?
yeah, that was high school. I was born and raised in Kansas, but when I was 13, my grandpa decided to launch a magazine called American Cowboy Magazine that went on to do very well and bought buffalo and wanted to have a ranch and couldn't do that in Kansas. So we moved to Wyoming. All the families moved, and that's where I grew up. We didn't grow up on a ranch though.
Well, we actually have spent quite a bit of time. In fact, it's the state of my driver's license in South Dakota and over in Rapid City, the
Oh,
Black
yeah.
Hills, and been through that area. Spent a lot of time in Wyoming, and as I understand it, I mean, you kind of built worked with a pretty decent sized church there. And as I heard your story, I was listening to you and Mike talk about it. I'm sitting here going, man, how do you get to almost mega church in Wyoming? Because good gracious, there are more bison buffalo there than there are
There's more
people.
cows than humans.
Come on.
Yeah. That's what makes it what people want and all that too. But yeah, it was interesting. Obviously, we had conviction and passion at that time. I think Simple Church had just come out, a book about we were really obsessed about doing three things and nothing else. We were passionate about serving the city before they knew who we were. And so, coming into a city like Cheyenne, the capital, and buying down the price of gas at gas stations and serving just in local ways, it created a good energy for a foundation to build off of, and then it's like anything, it's timing, it's people, it's God, so much of it's not formulaic, and then parts of it are like, if there is any formula, it's like, do way less than you think you should and do it very, very well, and then as you scale, you'll add things. That seemed to help us accelerate.
Were you a hustler? Were you high energy and making it happen? And, the fact that it was for God, you dialed it up to 11. Some people will get that
Yeah.
reference. Some people won't.
But for me, it took me years to have language for it. So at the time, my language was just work your dream job and chase what's in your heart. You'll never work a day in your life kind of like philosophy. I grew up in the era of nothing matters more than sacrificing everything for the kingdom. And these are still things that drive me today, but the definitions of them are interesting because at the time, my identity was so wrapped up in living on mission, living a purpose driven life and making impact. And a lot of times, the worst thing for someone who isn't ready for scale or isn't healthy for growth is to grow. That's one of the most dangerous things. And for me, my drive and ambition years later, after a lot of pain, realizing that all of it was just an attempt to be significant, an attempt to find significance through my identity in ministry. And the platform was the vehicle to drive the car 100 miles an hour, to work 100 hours a week, to never stop, to not have a marriage, and then to somehow redeem it by saying, "This is all for the kingdom." So I'm sorry I can't be here and connected with you, be intentional in my marriage and intentional with my own life and my own health and my own addictions. This is for the kingdom. We're doing stuff here. See all the impact we've made. See the 1,000 people we've baptized this year. So it was confusing, to be frank. It was very confusing because it's like all this good is happening and there's no foundation. There's complete erosion. There's complete, like, this ambition isn't on a highway. It's on a have you ever seen those videos of the boat drivers that are driving so fast they leave the water? And then they're almost like a boat flying. And I watch those videos because you know what's coming. But man, they're going so fast. It's pretty fun to watch them fly and hit the waves and think they're in control. And then there comes a point where the boat just goes out of control and it flips. That's how I felt I was in so much of my life.
I think there are two things that came to mind while you were saying that. One, interviewed, gosh, I'm trying to think back. It's probably going to be a handful of interviews before this one. And we got off on the conversation of Ecclesiastes. And it's, in
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes, this is King Solomon, the preacher,
Yeah.
speaking, the
All meaning.
wealthiest, more women, all these kind of things. We don't want to unpack that, but
Yeah.
basically was saying that everything was vanity is the translation, but it's hevel, haval, which is just poof. It's just nothing that matters
Mm,
in that. Then the second thing that came to me, it's probably over in Matthew 7. I don't quote scriptures like a lot of people do, but it's the tail end of the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says there's two types of people. There's the one that builds their house on the rock, the firm foundation of what he says, what he's just taught and shared for the last two chapters in the Sermon on the Mount. And then there's the one that does not, builds it on
mm,
sand. And here's what comes to me when you mentioned the boat. This is what I got.
yeah.
It's that Jesus said, and you know what? I listened to the Sermon on the Mount all during COVID. I would listen to it
Mm,
almost every morning. So thousands of times I have listened. It's 15 minutes, by the way, which is a great sort of
wow.
meditation and all. Just, it's kind of what helped me get away from some of the hustle and all, slows you
Yeah.
down. But Jesus says, for both of those people, that the storms came and the winds came and everything else came, life circumstances comes to both of them. I think in sometimes Christian circles, we think that when we punch our ticket for whatever that means, I won't get into that theology. I think some of it's wrong, but when we punch our ticket for whatever the next life is, that everything's going to be awesome. But
Yeah.
Jesus said that the winds are going to come, the storms are going to come for both. And when you were talking about that boat, I was just thinking about how there was no anchor there. Does
Yeah.
that sound like you even when you were in ministry?
100%. I mean, for me, what I realize is that as a young boy, I thought I was bad and that there was no way God could love me. Now, he had to love me because he had to love everybody. That's what he promises. But he doesn't really like me. And he doesn't like me because I've got these addictions and these problems that I can't figure out how to get control of. The problem for me, well, the worst place for me to go, and this is me, this is not everybody's story. It was my journey and my story, but I've learned that I've met a lot of us, a lot of me around the world, unfortunately. But um, the church was just a platform for me to try to earn God's love. And when you don't feel loved, how hard will you work to earn it? Well, you work really, really hard. And what happens is, so I've been kind of like reflecting on this, and God gave me this picture of like you can have the right what with the wrong why. And that's what creates the unsustainable how. So the fact that I was a pastor or in church or anybody that is in ministry or thinks about what they're doing as vocational ministry isn't always, sometimes it is the problem, but oftentimes it's not the problem. It's why. And when you, a lot of us think our why is pure, and we really do. We are convinced that why we do what we do is noble and impactful. It's why we have to sacrifice everything. It's why we're willing to give everything, is because there is some form of deeper why. For me, I realized later on why I wasn't deep enough in my why. My why was actually unrelated to impact on others' lives. That was a cool outcome and a cool part of what I got to do. My why was I'm going to prove that I'm lovable. And I'm going to do that because I'm going to be successful at what I'm doing. I call them mission driven leaders. These are people that are in churches, in nonprofits, in businesses, at home. They're all of us that we live a life on mission. But if we aren't grounded, to your point, if there is no anchor, the mission often becomes a mistake. And when the mission becomes a mistake, we risk losing the very mission we're even working on, we're building, because we can't sustain what it takes to, at the pace required, at the intensity required. Then what starts to happen is that our beliefs start to get jeopardized, our behaviors start to become questionable, like our community, we start to isolate. All of these things start to have a recipe towards what I call chaos. And now we're stuck because I'm living on mission and I'm successful and it's working or growing or whatever, but everything underneath is chaos. The boat is in the air I can't tell anybody at this point that that's what's going on. I'll lose my job. I'll lose everything I'm building. So we lie to ourselves. It's funny, even the visual of the boat driver. I wonder what he's thinking when he's flying upside down. It would be ludicrous for us to think, "I'm in control." You can hear the boat driver, "I'm in control. I will correct it. I'll correct the boat. I'll land the boat." And you're looking on the other side, dude, like, "Dude, you're done. Like, this is ending horrible." But we convince ourselves months along the journey, years along the journey, "I'm still in control," and we're deceiving ourselves.
Mm. I want to remember to ask, at what point did you realize you were deceiving yourself? But I want to drill down on a few things. There are people that believe there is no calling higher than serving in
Yeah,
some type of a local church or, missionary, or missionary in Africa would be even higher than that, I'm sure.
yeah,
I noticed that a great deal when I spent a few years in Bible school with a lot of Christians, and I can be hard on Christians. I am one, so I want to be careful about that. But
yeah,
I really observed it, that there is this thought that there's this pecking order. You were in that doing the thing that most people would say you cannot be serving and doing anything of a higher calling mission, if you want to throw
yeah,
the mission
yeah.
in there. So what's up? Why couldn't you be sanctified? Why were you dealing with, you know, addictions and things like that?
Yeah,
Come on,
yeah.
tell what
You're
on there.
asking some tough questions and some very real questions. These are questions I've wrestled with for a decade now, on and my wife and I, and because I'll answer it a couple of ways, but I'll give an example. My wife is one of the most, like, interesting examples that I feel conflicted about because you're talking about me. That was me. There is no other thing to do. In fact, when I resigned from church work because I felt like I had to. For the sake of my marriage and everything. But in my mind, I could not resolve that that was the only thing I was supposed to ever do in my life. So now I'm stuck, Tim. Like I'm literally like stuck. I can't go do back into the thing that I always thought I would do the rest of my life, but I had to leave. I had left the thing and because I needed healing, and it was interesting, I had such an idol about what church work was, and again, I've gotta be very careful because there are pastors out there that I think they should be, and they should be doing what they're doing, and there should be churches, and, like, I actually went and we can talk about later, but I went through an interesting arc over the last decade of, like, you as you come out of hurt, you go, "This is everything wrong with it," then you kinda heal, and you realize, like, there was good in it, and so I'm in a healthier place, but when I had first come out, I couldn't imagine a world, and yet my wife, who is closer to Jesus than I probably could ever get in 2 lifetimes, the way she hears from God, the way she pursues God, the way God loves her, the way I see his favor in her life, the intimacy she has, the depth in relationships she has. She's a dental hygienist, and she would look at me and is like, "Adam, you like so I can't be in ministry as a dental hygienist?" And I would struggle because there's part of me, and if I'm very frank and honest and vulnerable, says, "No, like, you're missing out," and yeah, I would never tell her that. And yet, here I was, to your point, like, living the life, chasing the dream, doing everything that I thought I was supposed to, and miserable and addicted and l killing my life, killing my family, killing my marriage, killing myself. Um, who's living who's on in mission? Who's living their calling? And I think for a lot of us in the ministry space, we really confuse what we're actually called to do. We latch on to, we're compelled by it, we're moved by a story, we're compelled by a narrative that we were raised under. And if our identity isn't healed, then it just becomes the thing that we try to find the identity. But I don't think it's, to be honest, and fair to the church and all of that. It's not any different in business. I had a very tragic story happen with the CEO that I worked for in my last company, and he had a tragic ending to his life and all this stuff. It's no different in business. So it's not a church problem, it's a human problem. But man, the church is addictive for finding that.
It is the tough thing about, I have to say, it is amazing how many dudes like us that have these issues. And let me just say, for those that might be listening in, Adam and I, we're not ugly dudes, but we wouldn't ever be confused for a Brad Pitt or a model. I did see a picture of
True.
your family. You married way up. The
Yeah.
food, I don't know why
Yes.
women like that are attracted to some of us that are, lighting our hair on fire, acting like maybe they think at some point we're going to be super successful.
Yeah.
But it is fascinating. But one of the things that is a little bit different from business and ministry, and I want to move on to kind of in your business and then talk about kind of the healing hustle that you're working on now. But I think this is important. It is different when you throw God into the equation of
Mhm.
achiever,
Yeah.
leadership, money, success.
Yeah.
I do think that throws an extra bit of, I don't know if it's gas on the fire. You mentioned that you thought you were bad and you were trying to prove, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you were
Yeah.
attempting to prove your goodness.
Yep.
And the way to do that is to go do stuff in church world. But it sounds like some of your addictions even made you feel badder than good, maybe.
Well, the problem is you can't sustain the pace that you're trying to run at to prove that you're good. So the $1,000,000 question is, well, how do you recover your pace? Well, we only recover, there's 2 options. Like if you're moving towards chaos, you numb. If you're moving towards sustainability, then you actually recharge. But healthy people recharge and they learn how to operate at high level and recharge their body and do it in healthy ways. Most of us just numb. Our numbing and what's funny though in addiction work and all of that is we emphasize so much on the actual addiction. Oh, you're a porn addict or you're a sex addict or you're a alcoholic or it's not even about any of that. Like that is the drug. The question is, what are you numbing? It's like I'm numbing the fact that I'm not good and I'm trying to earn that by a chaotic life and chaotic pace that I can't sustain, so I numb. So it's this back and forth. It's because when you're baptizing a bunch of people and your church is growing to 1,000 people or 1,500 in a small town in Wyoming, you're like, "It's working. I can't stop this." So what has to stop? The impact or the addiction? Like, I don't know, the addiction. It's this tug of war, and obviously, like, I needed to just move on and get out of the way, but because I'm a Enneagram 3, wired for achievement kind of guy, you just stay and you think you can manage it all.
And usually that implodes somehow. Way.
Yeah.
So,
I call it the ambition trap.
yeah, well, I'll go ahead and share the addiction that I've recognized that I had. The problem with my addiction is that it is acceptable and often applauded in our
Yeah.
culture. My addiction was the addiction to more.
Yeah.
And that is, it wasn't necessarily money and it wasn't necessarily success, even though that was part of that equation. It was more business, more idea. I am fortunate that it didn't lead to more women or that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But an addictive nature is an addictive nature.
Yeah.
And it can cause challenges and issues. For me, it was a crash that was external, and some people would say, well, that was 2008 and wasn't your doing. God hasn't told me that he brought the entire world's economy down just to get my attention. But I know that when it happened, he said, here's my opportunity. So
Yeah.
So I haven't taken that burden on my shoulders, even though I guess maybe I can. But tell me about the transition, because I don't think you just woke up one morning and says, you know what, I'm going to begin meditating and spending some quiet
Yeah,
time with the Lord, and I'm just going to work through this.
no. Unfortunately, it's a long journey of pain. None of us change until there's enough pain. They say the healing journey is 3 to 5 years, so it's a long journey, and usually it does come on the backside of some version of pain. For you, it sounds like 2008. For me, it was my addictions finally taking me to a point that I never thought I would go outside of my marriage, and then that led to, I can't keep doing what I'm doing, and my wife and I were questioning whether or not we should even stay married or not, and really facing the end of a life in one degree, and, I don't know, it's like, we don't go to the doctor until our heart really, really hurts. I've met so many guys on this, as I've shared this story and this journey, that had, like, literal heart attacks, physical heart attacks, just strictly due to stress and business and living on mission, and it's incredible what we will endure thinking we can survive it. I left the name hustle in there because I'm not asking people to not hustle. Hustle's a very real part of our world. I just realized for me, it was like there was such an addiction to hustle. It was the chaos created this weird calm. And for me, ultimately, enough pain made me resign. My wife and I were literally like facing the end of our relationship, but that wasn't even the end of our healing. That was like the beginning of the chaos in one sense. It was like that was just admitting like we're not well. And that sometimes is the hardest, longest journey. And like admitting to that is honestly just the beginning of unfolding the things that you can do to actually heal. But yeah, it was a long journey.
Let's take a quick break from the show. I've got a question for you. Are you looking for your next great read? Something that pulls you in, makes you think, and maybe even shifts the way you see the world? If so, I want to invite you into the story of Coach, a story of success redefined. It's the journey of Cooper Travis, a man who seems to have it all: money, influence, the fast paced life. But despite everything, he's still chasing something more. Sound familiar? Coach is a powerful fiction story that challenges the conventional definition of success and offers something deeper, something eternal. Grab your copy today wherever books are sold, or visit timwinders.com/books. It's a read you won't forget. All right, back to the show. I'm gonna drill down a little bit and get slightly nosy. You mentioned resigning. I know you were in ministry. I know you were, involved with some things that in general probably churches don't approve of.
Yeah.
Um, did you really have a choice, or was it something that you were forced to do? And the reason why I bring it up is that for a while I had the illusion of control when '08 was, everything was unraveling around me.
Mm,
And so I'm asking it not necessarily to put you on the spot or for any
yeah.
type of, I'm sort of asking it for the person that's sitting there going, I wonder if I'm in a position where I've got control, or if I'm like maybe Adam and Tim, where they really, and because I actually describe some of my journey, and I don't know that I've done it just to convince. I mean, I'll say it bluntly. We were homeless and bankrupt,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
talking figuratively either.
Yeah.
Um, so what can you tell me maybe just a little bit more about your separation from ministry?
Yeah, so fortunately for me, it wasn't something somebody asked me to do. I just knew that I couldn't continue in the role that I was in, stand here and not feel, I was deathly afraid. This is very specific and detailed and vulnerable, but I had so much fear that God was going to expose me because he hated me, absolutely hated me, that this is how dark it gets and how jacked up in our mind. I laugh now, but in the moment, you cannot take the laughter. It was fear to the depth of fear, but I swept out a shed in my backyard with mouse turds there was mouse turds in there, and there's the thought that if you inhale mouse feces, that you might get sick and die. And I literally was overwhelmed with the thought that this was how God was gonna kill me. And until I resign, I will keep facing these moments where I'm going to die. Plane crashes, all kinds of stuff. I mean, the fear just took on a life of its own that God hated me that much, he was going to kill me. And, so I did resign on my own, but the desire was and it wasn't even noble at the time. It was honestly just running. It was like, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. I don't even know what it means to pursue healing because I don't even know where I'm at. So, there was a lot of it that was just like, I don't know what I need to do, but I need to stop. And sometimes stopping is like one of the hardest things for a mission-driven, high achieving
Do you
person.
feel like a failure leaving ministry? I've heard most people that have quote unquote left ministry feel as if they have failed the utmost mission that they could have had on their life, and most things become secondary, but they're going to do it anyway. They're going to go after the filthy lucre and chase after the money, which you did well with that. But we'll talk about that briefly in a second. But did you feel like a failure?
Failure feels like an empty word to describe what I felt. It doesn't feel deep and dark enough. I felt I mean, to feel like God is going to kill you and find a way, I would read scripture very I had to actually stop reading scripture for a while because I would read the story of Saul when Samuel came to Saul and said he was grieving because Saul had started the sacrifice and he wasn't supposed to. And Saul, it says in the scriptures, he like uttered like, "Oh, what have you done?" Like today, God has found somebody else and his spirit has moved on. And I was that. God looked at me and goes, "Oh, who are you? I have all these other men around you that are way more faithful, and I'm gonna go put my spirit on them. And good luck." And I mean, it was dark, and I remember feeling just I remember one moment, Tim, where I had a detached garage, not connected to my house, detached from my house. I had a recording studio, and I was back in there, and I was weeping like a baby. Just failure, all my identity was a mess, like, this had been my lifelong work at that time, a decade of work, and didn't know if I'd even survive, and I heard a knock on my door. Detached garage, you have to go through my gated fence to get back to my detached garage, and a highway patrolman was standing there. And I opened the door, and I was a little bit scared. I was like, "What is a highway patrolman doing at my house, in my detached garage that she had to walk through a fence?" And she handed me $500 in a check, and she said, "The Holy Spirit told me to come here and tell you that he is in this with you, and I don't know what you're going through and where you're at, but does that mean anything?" And I just looked at her, I was like, "You have no idea what you're doing right now and who you're talking to." It was a lot of moments like that that helped me, but yeah, failure.
So obviously, at some point during that stage, you moved into a business world. The Lord moved you. Obviously, you didn't, I don't think, had that going on when you left. Tell me a little bit about that transition and how long was that season? Because I believe that there's someone listening in that's in a season like that, and they need to know that it will end, but it may not be the ultimate end because you've continued on and now you're doing other things.
Yeah.
I think the Lord opens up doors for us to get us to other places.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild journey and I'll try to keep it very brief, but I didn't know what I was gonna do.
Was money tough? I
We
mean, were you broke, busted,
we left.
or okay?
Yeah, I mean, we left. I lost my source of income and everything, but to make things even crazier, my wife decided that she was gonna quit her job, and we were both not gonna have jobs because we both wanted just a complete transformation of our life. I posted my house on Facebook and sold it in 2 days. Believe it or not, sold it in 2 days, and so then we had a little bit of money, not a lot, a little bit of money to figure out what's next. My wife had a felt like she heard a word from God that one night in August, and God spoke to her very specifically and clearly. Again, I don't hear that, and I was the one standing on stages, but the dental hygienist that loves Jesus passionately and, hears from God that he was gonna open up an opportunity. It was gonna come from an unexpected place, and it was gonna happen this week. I was like, "You heard those like, those sentences and those phrases?" And, she writes it down in the journal, and I was like, "That is wild." And my buddy Adam calls me from another city in Wyoming, opposite end of the state, and we hadn't talked in 10 years, and I had an idea for a company, but didn't know really how to get it going. Called me and I said, "I'm not your guy. This is not what I'm supposed to go do next." Didn't even say anything to Amber. He calls back a couple days later and was like, "No, I think you're the guy. You're supposed to help us bring this to life." And of course, I finally shared it, and the rest is history. We built ZME and left Wyoming, went to Idaho, which is where I'm at now, but bounced around a little bit to Idaho and built the beginnings of ZME, and then moved to the Bay Area, to California and San Francisco, and scaled the team. We raised a Series A round and then came back to Boise, but it was just a wild journey because it was like, okay, now I work in tech. I'm a like early stage founder, and I'm, you know, trying to build a company and an idea, and also like, don't forget, heal my marriage and figure out who I am and what just happened and what did we just come out of and where are we going now on top of building what's next. So it was a very interesting season.
Were you still, the word hustle, I'm not sure sometimes captures that. What did you throw yourself into that in the similar fashion that you had in ministry? Or was there something you had learned and you did some things differently?
It's a really good question. I would answer it like probably most of us, we do both at the same time. I had come out of that season and thought, I'm never going back to the pace of life, the chaos, the drive, the addictions. I'm going to get the help. Obviously, I started getting counselors in my life and started processing the deeper things that we needed to work through. And so there was a part of our life that was very peaceful and that was very healed in the hustle. We were starting the work. And I remember I could see it now in everybody else because I knew it in myself. But now I had felt like I had been like that M. Night I can't remember his last name, but the movie The Village, when at the very end of the movie, they walk out and it's like, wait, this is what I've been doing this whole time. Veil had been torn off my eyes a little bit. So now I can see it everywhere. Like, oh my gosh, I'm moving to the Bay Area. This is like shark eat shark, dog eat dog. Like this is the worst of this world. So I experienced some interesting dynamics where I could both see it in everybody else, but also recognize I'm still healing from all of this. And then I'm still doing it in different ways. So it was a very like transitional season for us, but also it was like the beginning of our desire to do it differently. How do you achieve? I started to draw this picture, and on one end of the picture was ambition, success, achievement, and it was just a line, and on the other side was sustainability, and I felt like arguments in the conversation were just, w you have to pick. You get ambition or you get sustainability. It's a spectrum, and I just would argue and fight with myself and my friends and my wife and, like, how do you do this? How do you actually achieve and sustain? Is it even possible? And it was years, years, and years later of what I'm doing now, but the God gave me a picture of a quadrant of what it looked like to actually have a high degree of sustainability and a high degree of ambition at the same time. But if you're outside of that upper right fourth quadrant, if you're in the quadrant to the left, you have a high degree of ambition and a low degree of sustainability. That's most of us. And that is what I call chaos and what leads to most of the, for some tragic downfalls, for other just the chaos in their life. And then the bottom quadrants are a low degree of ambition. If you have a high degree of sustainability, it looks like comfort, and a low degree of sustainability and a low degree of ambition is just aimless, but most of the world I live in is that upper left quadrant.
So it's interesting. I shared with you a little bit before we hit record about this role that I'm in now with COO of a company. Back in February, I was meeting in a mastermind with a group of people down in Sarasota, Florida. I think that's what you do with the Healed Hustle too, y'all.
Yeah.
I actually, though, feel if someone hasn't worked on some of this or is aware of it, that those type environments can fuel some of the things. Because there were some masterminds I
Yeah.
did back in the early 2000s that, man, I was like jacked up and competitive and all of that. That's a whole nother story. But
And you got praised for that.
oh my gosh, yeah. And then you found yourself fudging and saying things just to make sure you looked okay in the eyes of others around their topic.
Yeah.
But I was in this, it was just a, I don't want to say a casual mastermind, not one that a lot of people had been doing, interacting with. All these people were talking. It was great. I love it because I actually, the coach in me loves speaking into other people's lives that way. When it came my turn, someone just called it out like an amazing thing. They said, "You seem like you're bored and you might need a new challenge."
Wow.
And I'm just, I was kind of cruising along. My wife and I were living in the RV and all that kind of stuff. And so I don't want to say called out of retirement or anything like that. I mean, I'm in my early 60s and I believe I've got a long life ahead of me. So I realized that I am not bored now and I'm extremely
Mm.
challenged, but I've learned a lot
Mm.
and I'm attempting to approach things with a different pace. But
Yeah.
I feel as if I'm productive and I'm right in the place I'm supposed to be.
Wow.
All that being said, where are you now with the things you've done in the past, with what you're doing to offer and minister? See, I actually wrote down that you went from ministry to business and now you're back in ministry. I'm sure you're getting paid. I know you get paid for what you do and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
a lot of people conflate those two. But tell me about what it's led to now with the Healed Hustle.
Well, I just wrapped up a 10-year career in tech. Half of that was in ZME, and then I went through an acquisition of another startup I joined and ended up at Intuit for 7, 8 years and led teams. And that was honestly where Amber and I's healing journey really took off. And it was our attempt to answer the question, is ambition and sustainability actually possible? And as we leaned into that question for ourselves over the last 5 to 7 years, the answer is obviously yes, but it requires a high degree of intentionality. And that's, I think, the difference between who I used to be and who I am today is I loved what you were saying. It's like I'm productive and there's a lot required of me right now. And so is that bad? Should I not be doing that? Should I be looking for the lazy option? It's like, no, that message is not going to resonate with high achieving people. But what will resonate, and when you study those who have gone before us that have done very, very successful things and been to some degree sustainable in their life and family and all the things, there is often a high degree of intentionality. They're intentional about the pace at which they live. They're intentional about recharging versus numbing. They're intentional about the community and connection that they surround themselves. And those that have a falling out, most of the time, they all talk about the moment where they ignored their community, isolated, and created the boundaries so that they could numb in isolation. And scale will do that. I mentioned a second ago the ambition trap. You get so successful, you're the Lance Armstrong. I'm on top of the world. I can't tell everybody I'm doping now, so I'm just gonna wait till it all comes out, and one day it will, and then you lose everything. We do that as pastors. I pastor a church of 20,000 now, or a business of, my former CEO sold his company for $365 million. So we ride the journey up, and then we're trapped in the storm that we've created. And those that the difference is when you kind of look at them as those that are intentional, have figured out how to do that in what I call the 7 hidden variables. I won't go into them all, but there's these hidden variables, our beliefs and our pace and all that stuff. So I think where I'm at today is we've learned the practice of how to be intentional in the midst of building and hoping to make impact. I want to change the world. Mission driven people want to change the world. We want to impact the world however that's laid before us. But if we're not intentional in some of these things and really understand why we're doing it, then it makes our how all jacked up. And when our how gets jacked up, that's to your point. It's like you're changing that for you.
What are some, and this is the, I've really come to believe that this is also a very personal, unique journey for every individual. And that most people, there could be some people out there that they might be in that lower ambition level. They're not
Mhm.
driven by certain things. In many ways, I admire them. My grandfather, truthfully,
Yeah.
this conversation wouldn't mean anything to him because if you had the conversation about his purpose and his mission in life, it would be like, I just want to make enough to put food on the table.
Yeah.
Working as a guard at the local chemical plant down the street in my guardhouse that I go down to. So,
Wow.
I mean, there
Yeah.
is certain people that won't even,
Yeah.
can't even equate to this. But what are, I mean, I might share a couple of mine, but what are some things for you? And I want to say that practices are individual. This
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's for all. I need to do, Tim
Yeah.
and Adam said, but
Yeah.
what are a few things that you've latched onto at this season? You
Yeah.
go, I really do need to do XYZ.
Yeah, I love that question. So, part of the Healed Hustle, we do have 4 practices that we talk about, and one of them for me came out of it's funny because if you ask me, like, "What podcasts do you listen to?" And it's like, "Oh, I listen to this business podcast or this or that podcast," and those are great podcasts. It's just not recharge, and I challenge a lot of people to sometimes of like, "No, what kind of story is like recharges your soul that has nothing to do with you achieving anything or walking away going, I need to go do X, Y, or Z. Or I'll meet somebody that like runs marathons or, I'm running today, 3 miles, I gotta get my 3 miles in. Why are you running? And we would call that healthy. I'm learning, I'm growing, and I just call it more addiction to ambition. Running is great. But what I realized is that so there's a nature preserve down the street. It's about a mile from my house. Got this really tall grass and it's got a trail in it. And I just walk over there every morning and I touch the grass. And so I have a principle called touch the grass. To your point, you may not need to do it on a trail. You may not need to touch grass. I don't know what you need to do, but the practice for me of touching the grass has nothing to do with achievement. I'm just touching grass because it puts me outside and my feet on the ground, and I get to see the sun kinda come up over the mountains in Boise, and I'm reminded that I'm not in control, and that there's nothing I can do to control my life in all the ways I think I can control my life. The second thing that I did that I felt like helped me in a number of different areas was I moved my phone away from my bed. And silly practice, but, I found myself checking my email or social, whatever, first thing when I get out of bed, and I just find myself comparing, "Well, he's doing better. He's got more customers. He's building a bigger business. He's got more traction. He's got a bigger house. He's got more whatever." That's how you wake up. And so then everything in your ambition for the next 8 hours is from that place. So I have this like thought or the framework I've been wrestling with of how do we go from I do this thing so I matter to I matter so I do this thing. It's just a simple reframe. And the thing that puts me in the from state of I do this thing so that I matter is all the comparison and social media and all that stuff. And so getting the phone away from me so that I literally tell myself, go touch the grass, then you can get on your phone helps me sometimes, I guess, like, start in the right place, but it's always a my wife's like, "Did you touch the grass today? Because 'Cause you're kinda grumpy."
It's fascinating. I think you said her name was Amber.
Yeah,
My journey is very similar, and we could probably do a poll of how many men have gone through this process, and there's a lot of grace, there's God's hand, there's miracles, but in almost all the situations, I would guess there is a woman that
yeah,
has been there
yeah.
and heard from God and put up with it and all of that kind of stuff. So I love to touch the grass because something that I was thinking before you even said about the phone was that you can't really touch the grass and scroll at the same time.
Wow.
You'd be on a screen, and for me, and I'm at a different age and all that, but I've eliminated all what would be considered news media.
That's
I
good.
still do some social, but social is like a pop in, post and leave, not a scroll. And for me, I've noticed I really have to have some still and quiet time early in the day. And I don't get up at like 4. I'm not like a 4, get up early.
Yeah.
And another thing that's weird, maybe this is old dude. I was talking to you earlier about how I heard you and Mike talking about old dude. So this is kind of like old dude jumping in here. It's like I don't do the gym anymore. I'm not an anti-gym, but man, I'd rather do a 45-minute walk at a
Yeah,
good pace. When you're in an RV, which we've lived for 7 years, you don't have a gym all the time. And you know what?
yeah,
I'll look in the mirror and I'll say, I'm good. Good.
yeah.
You know what? I don't need to impress anybody with the biceps or anything anymore. And I do think that's a lot of healthy, healed hustle. Adam, tell me about the healed hustle, the program you have. We're going to let you give, where people can get to you and things like that. I believe that you and I could continue talking about this conversation, but we may circle back later. I said
Yeah.
earlier, I'd love for me, you and Mike, and maybe one other, maybe we get like some different ages to jump on a call. But tell me about the healed hustle. What's it all about? What are you doing there and where can people find it?
Yeah. So the healed hustle is really it's 8 steps that I went through to answer the question, is ambition and sustainability actually possible? And the 8 steps are that first you have to audit, and that was my first experience with taking inventory of my life, my family. And then you have to be willing to stop. For some of us, that's as extreme as quitting jobs. For others, it's a new position, or for others, it's just a season of pausing. But there needs to be an intentional stop and pause. The third and the most deepest part of healed hustle is what I call heal your why. And that's where, or sorry, heal the lies. And this is where we really get honest about what is driving my ambition in the first place of why I'm doing what I do. And then the fourth step is that we reframe our why. And really, those 4 foundations start to set the new trajectory for the drive of our ambition. So the other 4 are practices, and the first practice is to prioritize connection. Most of us ignore our most intimate people because I don't walk through the door and they go, "Adam is here, founder and CEO of, blah, blah, blah." My son goes, "Dad, can we throw the ball?" And my wife goes, "Here's the trash, it needs to be taken out." But you walk into the mastermind and they go, "Adam Cruz is here, welcome him." And that feels so good. So we talk about how do you actually revalue the relationships that matter most, because that's who's gonna be there in the end. And then we talk about the recharge routines where we actually do an inventory on recharging versus just more striving. And we should talk about it another day. We talked about it at the very beginning, but if we're not careful, we just turn all of our striving into our kids and we call it sports. And we make sure that they are the best and they're in all the things, and we just teach them how to be addicts. Then the seventh pillar is that we reframe, or we redefine success. And so we do a step on mission and our vision for our life. And then the final step is that we actually put into practice the all of the tools. It's called sustain. And it comes from when I went on my healing journey and years and years of walking this out and trying to answer this question. I met with one of my counselors years later at a coffee shop, and I said, "Man, it's still so hard, as a high achiever, ambitious person. I just want to take the course and graduate." And I think a lot of people even think about the healed hustle like, "Yeah, I'm going to do the course and graduate." And it's like, he looked at me, he said, "Adam, you never stop using the tools." And I said, "Man, isn't that the truth?" And then I come home and no joke, about 2 weeks later, my 80-year-old neighbor was on his way out and I asked him where he's going. He said, "I'm headed to my AA meeting." And I said, "AA meeting? Tell me more about that." And he said, "Well, Adam, I've been sober for 45 years." And I said, "Why do you still go?" And he said, "You never stop using the tools." And I just laughed. I was like, I'm writing about that right now. That is the 8th pillar is you don't graduate this thing. There is no healed hustle. We're always in process of learning how to go back at another season of my life. I'm doing it right now and take inventory and audit and slow things down that need to be slowed down and heal my why. It's a contingent circle, but that's the healed hustle. And we take guys through it, and you can go to thehealedhustle.com and take an assessment. I have an assessment where it's the first step of auditing. So
Is it a journey? It's not an event, right? See, that's one of the things going back to what you said earlier is like, it's an event and we're all looking for the easy button and
yeah,
I'm going to go to this event and spend a day and be
yeah,
all healed and fixed, stuff like
yeah.
that, right?
It's a journey. 3 to 5 years, honestly, that's not what the healed hustle is, but when you choose to lean in, it's a life hopefully just a lifetime, a new way of operating so that you can go back at 61 as a COO and be incredibly impactful.
Yeah. Man, Adam, I appreciate the conversation and I recommend folks jump over to the Healed Hustle. I've got it pulled up here and there are some good tools and all that you've got there. And I actually do believe that we are all at various places on this journey. And
Yeah,
I appreciate because I believe you're in all likelihood ministering to a group that's at a critical time. And I know you're probably like me. You would really rather people not have to go through a catalytic event
yeah,
to go through this change like we've had to. And I'm hopeful and I'm prayerful that people can. So, man, Adam Cruz, The Healed Hustle, y'all go check that out. And we'll have links and all down below. This has been a great conversation. We'll circle back because, like we've discussed, it is a journey. There's not an easy button with this. There's not a 3 steps and you're done. Even the 8
yeah,
steps are cyclical, in my
yeah,
opinion, probably.
yeah,
So, and those last few, sustainability, I believe that next to last one, the redefining of success, which used to be the tagline of Seek, Go, Create, by the way, redefining success.
wow,
And
let's go.
the story of success redefined. That's my novel. I think that was the tagline of my novel. It's just like all about everything has been how do we define success? So,
Yeah,
and that's a constant process because I'm in the process of redoing that right now. So check
yeah,
out Adam Cruz's stuff. Go find him on all the places that he is. We'll have all the links down below. We're Seek, Go, Create, and this message that Adam and I discussed is really what we started back in 2019 talking about. We've been
mm,
talking about this ever since. It's the journey
yeah,
that we're on. So, Adam, I appreciate you talking to us about it here. We have new episodes every Monday. We have some great things going on YouTube. People can look at these two good looking dudes talk for an hour and 15 minutes. I know that that is going to sell it, Adam. And of course, we're on all the podcast platforms, all the socials, everything. Join the conversation. Thanks for listening in. See you next time at Seek, Go, Create. Hey, before you go, I want to leave you with a challenge. If you're enjoying the conversations here on Seek, Go, Create, I think you'll love the deeper journey my novel Coach, A Story of Success Redefined, takes you on. It's a story that's moved many of my readers to rethink what success actually means and how to live a life aligned with faith, purpose, and peace. Pick up your copy today wherever you buy books or at timwinders.com and begin the journey for yourself. Thanks again for listening. And as always, keep seeking, keep going, and keep creating.